The transition from piston power to jet propulsion aboard aircraft carriers began almost immediately after the Second World War, and it carried considerable risk. Flight decks designed around propeller-driven aircraft now had to accommodate faster approach speeds, longer takeoff rolls, and engines with sluggish throttle response at low speed. The platforms that attempted this transition first were experimental in practice, even when they carried operational designations. The McDonnell F-H-1 Phantom was the first purpose-built jet fighter to operate from an American carrier, completing qualification trials aboard USS Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1946. It was underpowered and quickly outpaced by developments in engine technology, but it proved the concept was viable. The Vought F7U Pirate followed as another early turbojet design, though its performance was disappointing enough to limit it to brief and marginal operational use. The North American FJ-1 Fury achieved a more significant milestone, becoming the first jet to complete a full operational carrier deployment with a Navy squadron. Its straight wing layout reflected the conservative aerodynamics of the period. Across the Atlantic, the Royal Navy pursued its own path. The Supermarine Attacker entered service as Britain's first operational carrier jet fighter, flying from the decks of Fleet Air Arm carriers in the early 1950s. Like its American counterparts, it was a transitional design, useful for establishing jet procedures at sea, but quickly overtaken by the next generation of aircraft. The Korean War provided the first combat test of carrier-based jet fighters. But Task Force 77 maintained a near-continuous carrier presence off the Korean coast, and the aircraft flying from those decks encountered both air-to-air threats and demanding ground attack missions over difficult terrain. It was an operational environment that revealed both the promise and the limitations of the Navy's early jet fleet. The Hawker Sea Fury, a piston engine design already in Royal Navy service, saw extensive combat from British light carriers during the war. Though not a Cold War design by origin, its Korean War deployments were significant. Sea Fury pilots recorded confirmed kills against jet-powered MiG-15s, one of the few instances of a propeller-driven fighter downing a jet in combat. It represented the final chapter of piston engine carrier fighter operations. Among American jets, the Grumman F-9F Panther was the most widely used Navy fighter of the conflict. Its straight-wing configuration limited its performance against swept-wing opponents, but it proved rugged and dependable in the strike and escort roles that define most carrier aviation sorties over Korea. The McDonnell F-2H Banshee served alongside it, a twin-engine carrier fighter that deployed extensively from both fleet and light carriers during the war. Its range and payload made it well-suited to the extended missions the campaign demanded. The Douglas F-3D Skyknight filled a more specialized role as a carrier-capable night and all-weather fighter. It achieved distinction by recording the first confirmed jet-versus-jet kill at night, operating in conditions where most other carrier aircraft could not. The Royal Navy's carrier jet fighter development followed a trajectory distinct from that of the U.S. Navy, shaped by different procurement cycles, carrier sizes, and strategic priorities. Through the 1950s and into the early 1960s, the Fleet Air Arm operated a succession of increasingly capable types from its conventional carriers, before Britain's shift away from large-deck carrier aviation altered the program entirely. The Hawker Seahawk became the Royal Navy's standard single-seat carrier jet during the early to mid-1950s. It was a straightforward, reliable design that served as the backbone of Fleet Air Arm fighter squadrons and saw operational use during the Suez Crisis in 1956. Operating alongside it, the de Havilland Sea Venom provided a two-seat all-weather capability that the Seahawk lacked, extending the Fleet Air Arm's ability to operate in poor visibility and at night. A generation later, the Supermarine Scimitar entered service as the Royal Navy's first swept-wing single-seat carrier fighter. It was a large, powerful aircraft that marked a significant performance increase over the Seahawk, though its handling characteristics aboard carriers earned a difficult reputation. The de Havilland Sea Vixen succeeded the Sea Venom in the all-weather role, bringing a distinctive twin-boom airframe and improved radar-guided missile armament to the fleet. It was the last dedicated conventional fighter developed for British carrier operations. After the Sea Vixen, the Royal Navy's fighter future would belong to vertical and short takeoff designs. By the mid-1950s, the U.S. Navy was transitioning rapidly to swept-wing configurations and purpose-built fleet defense fighters. The straight-wing jets that had served in Korea were no longer adequate against improving Soviet bomber and missile threats, and the Navy pursued several parallel programs to field faster, more capable interceptors aboard its carriers. The results were uneven. The Grumman F9F/F9 Cougar was the most straightforward of these efforts, a swept-wing evolution of the proven Panther airframe. It entered service quickly and in large numbers, providing the fleet with a meaningful performance increase while more ambitious designs matured. The North American FJ2 and FJ3 Fury took a different approach, adapting the swept-wing lineage of the Air Force's F-86 Sabre for carrier operations. The FJ2 struggled with carrier suitability, but the improved FJ3 served more successfully across both fleet and Marine squadrons. Not every program of this period delivered on its intentions. The Vought F7U Cutlass was a radical tailless design that suffered chronic engine and structural problems, compiling one of the worst safety records in naval aviation history. The McDonnell F-3H Demon, initially plagued by engine failures of its own, eventually matured into a capable subsonic fleet defense platform and became the first Navy fighter to operationally carry the AIM-7 Sparrow missile. The Douglas F-4D Skyray was built around a different concept entirely: rapid climb-to-altitude interception, using a broad delta wing to reach incoming threats at high speed. It held a time-to-climb record but saw a relatively brief operational career. At the late 1950s brought sustained supersonic performance to the carrier deck for the first time. The aircraft introduced during this period were not incremental improvements. They represented a fundamental shift in what naval aviation could achieve, and two of them would go on to define American carrier fighter operations for the better part of 2 decades. The Grumman F-11F Tiger was the U.S. Navy's first carrier fighter capable of exceeding Mach 1 in level flight. It was compact, clean, and aerodynamically advanced for its time, but its limited range and radar capability restricted its usefulness in the fleet defense role the Navy increasingly prioritized. It served in modest numbers and was retired relatively early, though it gained lasting visibility through years of service with the Blue Angels flight demonstration team. The Vought F-8 Crusader carried a sharper operational legacy. Designed as a dedicated air superiority fighter, it was the last American carrier aircraft built with guns as its primary armament. Its performance in the fighter role was exceptional, and Crusader squadrons maintained a strong air-to-air record through years of combat deployments. It earned a reputation among pilots as a pure fighter in an era that was already moving toward missile-armed interceptors and multi-role platforms. The McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II redefined that era entirely. A large, twin-engine, 2-seat fighter, originally designed for fleet air defense, it evolved into the dominant Western carrier fighter from the early 1960s through the 1980s. Its combination of speed, radar capability, and weapons capacity made it adaptable to virtually every tactical role. No other naval fighter of the Cold War matched its production numbers, export reach, or operational longevity. The final 2 decades of the Cold War saw fewer new carrier fighter types enter service than any previous period. Development costs had risen sharply, and the aircraft introduced during these years were expected to remain in frontline use for far longer than their predecessors. Each of the 4 fighters that reached operational status in this period represented a distinct approach to carrier-based air power. The Yakovlev Yak-38 was the Soviet Union's only operational fixed-wing carrier aircraft of the Cold War, deployed from the Kiev-class carrier cruisers beginning in the mid-1970s. It was primarily a ground attack platform, though it carried a limited air defense tasking as part of the fleet's organic air cover. Its performance was constrained by the demands of vertical takeoff, and it never approached the capability of its Western counterparts in the fighter role. The BAE Sea Harrier brought vertical and short takeoff capability to the Royal Navy after the retirement of its conventional carriers. It was a small subsonic fighter with a capable radar and missile fit, and its combat record during the 1982 Falklands War, where Sea Harriers achieved multiple air-to-air kills without loss, validated the VSTOL carrier concept under operational conditions. The Grumman F-14 Tomcat restored dedicated fleet air superiority to the U.S. Navy. Built around the AWG-9 radar and the long-range AIM-54 Phoenix missile system, it was designed to engage multiple targets at extended range in defense of the carrier battle group. It remained the Navy's primary air defense fighter through the end of the Cold War and beyond. The McDonnell Douglas F/A-18 Hornet represented a deliberate shift in philosophy. Designed from the outset as a multi-role strike fighter, it replaced several single-role types and signaled the Navy's move toward platforms that could switch between air-to-air and air-to-ground missions within a single sortie. Its introduction marked the beginning of the doctrine that would dominate carrier aviation into the following century.